One word. That's all Joy Behar whispered under her breath, just loud enough for the microphone to catch, when she thought Angelina Jolie wasn't listening. But Angelina was listening. For the first 12 minutes, everything seemed normal. The polite questions about her new film, the careful answers about her humanitarian work. And then Joy said one word, just one word, and everything changed. Manipulator. She said it casually, almost dismissively, like she was describing the weather, not accusing a mother of turning her own children against their father on national television. What happened next would be replayed over 50 million times in the first 24 hours. Not because Angelina Jolie shouted, not because she cried. No, what made this clip unforgettable was the smile. That slow, dangerous smile that spread across her face as she leaned forward and asked Joy Behar a single question. A question Joy couldn't answer. What was the question? Subscribe right now, because you're about to find out why you should never, ever underestimate a woman who has already survived the worst the world can throw at her. The View studio felt different that morning. There was an electricity in the air that the production staff couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the guest. Angelina Jolie didn't do many television appearances anymore. At 51, she had become more selective, more private, more focused on her children and her humanitarian work than on promoting herself. Angelina Jolie, everyone, Whoopi announced, and the applause was thunderous. She settled into the guest chair with the poise of someone who had been in the spotlight since childhood, the daughter of Jon Voight, raised in Hollywood's brightest glare, shaped by its cruelties and contradictions into the woman she had become. "Thank you for having me," she said, her voice soft but carrying. "It's good to be here." The first 12 minutes were everything you'd expect from a promotional interview. They discussed Maria, the challenges of portraying such an iconic figure, the vocal training she'd undergone. They talked about her upcoming projects, her work with refugees, her transition from acting to directing and back again. Joy Behar sat quietly through all of it, watching, calculating. That familiar predatory stillness that regular viewers had come to recognize. It was Sarah who innocently opened the door. "Angelina, you've spoken about how your children have been your greatest source of strength through some difficult years. How are they doing now?" A genuine warmth crossed Jolie's face, the first real emotion she'd shown since sitting down. "They're extraordinary," she said simply. "Maddox is 24 now, working in film. Pax and Zahara are finding their own paths. Shiloh is dancing professionally. The twins are finishing high school. They've all grown into remarkable people, and I'm incredibly proud of them." "It must be wonderful to see them thriving," Sarah continued, "especially after everything your family has been through." Jolie nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Children are resilient, more resilient than we give them credit for. They see everything, understand everything, and ultimately they make their own choices about who they want to be." That's when Joy leaned forward. "Speaking of choices," she said, her voice taking on that edge everyone in the studio recognized. "Several of your children have chosen to drop their father's last name. Isn't that a bit extreme?" The temperature in the room dropped instantly. The other hosts froze. The audience went silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. But Angelina Jolie didn't flinch. She simply turned to face Joy, her expression unchanged, and said quietly, "I'm sorry?" "Your children," Joy continued, emboldened by the silence. "Vivian dropped Pitt from her name. Zahara did the same. Shiloh filed legal paperwork to do it. Some people might say that seems orchestrated. Some people might say a mother who truly wanted her children to have a healthy relationship with their father wouldn't allow, or encourage, that kind of public rejection." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Jolie was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Are you asking me a question, Joy? Or are you making an accusation?" Joy straightened in her chair, apparently pleased with herself. "I'm asking whether you bear any responsibility for the apparent estrangement between your children and their father, because from the outside it looks like—" "From the outside." Jolie repeated the phrase slowly, as if tasting something bitter. You're making judgments about my family, about my children, based on what things look like from the outside. I'm asking questions that millions of people are asking. No. Jolie's voice cut through Joy's like a blade. You're not asking questions. You're repeating tabloid narratives as if they were facts. There's a difference. Joy's face flushed. I'm a journalist. It's my job to ask difficult questions. Then ask them. Jolie leaned forward slightly, and the movement was somehow more threatening than if she'd shouted. Ask me about Maria Callas. Ask me about the refugee crisis. Ask me about the humanitarian work I've been doing for 20 years. Ask me anything that matters. But don't sit there and pretend that gossiping about my children's choices is journalism. The audience stirred. A few people actually applauded before falling silent again. Your children's choices are newsworthy, Joy insisted. When the children of two of the biggest movie stars in history publicly distance themselves from one of their parents, that's a story. My children are not a story. Jolie's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. They are human beings. They have their own experiences, their own feelings, their own reasons for the choices they make. And I will not sit here and justify or explain their decisions to satisfy your curiosity or your ratings. She paused, her famous eyes locked on Joy's. What I will tell you is this. My children know the truth. They lived it. And when they're ready, if they're ever ready, they can tell their own stories in their own words. Until then, I would ask that people like you respect their privacy instead of treating their pain as entertainment. Joy was clearly rattled now, but she pressed on. But surely you can understand why people are curious. Your divorce from Brad Pitt was extremely contentious. There were allegations. Allegations that were investigated and documented, Jolie interrupted, her voice sharp. Allegations that I made at great personal cost, knowing exactly what the public response would be. Allegations that my children witnessed firsthand. She stood up slowly, and the movement commanded every eye in the studio. You want to talk about what happened on that plane in 2016? Fine. Let's talk about it. There's an FBI report. There's documentation. There are witnesses. But you don't actually want to talk about that, do you? Because that would require you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, my children have their own reasons for the choices they've made. Reasons that have nothing to do with manipulation and everything to do with their own lived experience. She walked toward the panel desk, her presence somehow filling the entire studio. You want to paint me as a villain because it's easier. Because manipulative mother turns children against beloved father is a better story than children who witness something traumatic make difficult choices about their own identities. One narrative sells magazines, the other requires empathy. I never called you a villain, Joy started. You called me a manipulator. Jolie's voice was quiet but devastating. On live television, in front of millions of people, you suggested that I orchestrated my own children's decisions about their names, their identities, their relationships. You reduced their agency to nothing. You made them props in a narrative you created. She was standing directly in front of Joy now, and the contrast between them was striking. Jolie calm and controlled, Joy visibly shrinking in her chair. Let me ask you something, Joy. Do you have children? Joy nodded, seemingly caught off guard by the question. And when your children make decisions you don't agree with, or decisions that others don't agree with, do you expect to be held responsible for those choices? Do you expect strangers to call you a manipulator because your adult children exercised their own free will? Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jolie wasn't finished. My children range in age from 17 to 24. 3 of them are legal adults. They have their own minds, their own experiences, their own relationships with both of their parents. And they have made certain choices that reflect their own feelings. Feelings I didn't create and couldn't control even if I wanted to. Her voice softened slightly, but lost none of its power. Do you know what it's like to watch your children struggle with something painful? To want to protect them but know you can't? To see them make choices that will invite public scrutiny and judgment, and support them anyway because that's what a parent does? She paused, gathering herself. I have been called many things in my life. A wild child, a homewrecker, a saint, a villain. I've been put on pedestals and torn down from them more times than I can count. And through all of it, the one thing I have tried, the one thing I have fought for with everything I have, is to be a good mother. To put my children first. To protect them from the circus that comes with being born into this kind of fame. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. And you sit there, on national television, and you suggest that the choices my children have made, choices born from their own experiences, their own pain, their own healing, are somehow evidence of my manipulation. Do you have any idea how that feels? Do you have any idea what you're doing to them by saying these things? She turned to address the audience directly. I have spent the last 8 years trying to protect my children from exactly this kind of speculation. I have stayed silent when I wanted to scream. I have watched lies printed about me and said nothing because responding would only make things worse for them. I have sacrificed my own reputation, my own peace of mind, my own sanity at times, because that's what mothers do. We put our children first. She turned back to Joy, and there was fire in her eyes now. And then I come here, to promote a film I'm proud of, to talk about work that matters to me, and the first thing you want to discuss is whether I've brainwashed my own children. That's not journalism, Joy. That's cruelty dressed up as curiosity. The silence in the studio was absolute. Joy's face had gone pale. Her hands were trembling slightly. The confident attacker from moments ago had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely shaken. I was just asking questions that the public... The public? Jolie laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you something about the public, Joy. The public watched me go through a very painful divorce in real time. The public read every headline, every speculation, every lie. And some of the public, the ones who actually paid attention, understood that there are always two sides to every story, and sometimes one side stays silent to protect people who can't protect themselves. She returned to her chair but didn't sit down. Instead, she stood behind it, her hands resting on the back, looking at Joy with an expression that might have been pity. You've been doing this job for a long time, Joy. You've interviewed hundreds of people, and I'm sure you've told yourself that asking provocative questions is brave, that making people uncomfortable is somehow noble. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. But there's a difference between challenging someone's ideas and attacking their family. There's a difference between journalism and cruelty. And today, you chose cruelty. In front of millions of people, you chose to hurt a mother by questioning her relationship with her children. You chose to reduce 6 human beings to props in your narrative. She shook her head slowly. I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you had an opportunity today to have a real conversation about something meaningful, about art, about survival, about what it means to rebuild your life after everything falls apart. Instead, you chose to be small. And that choice says everything about you and nothing about me. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. Her face was red, her breathing rapid. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. Jolie's voice was calm, almost gentle. You can leave. That's always been your choice when things get difficult. Walk away. Refuse to engage. It's easier than actually examining what you've done. She tilted her head slightly, studying Joy with those famous eyes. But before you go, I want you to think about something. Every day, women in difficult situations watch shows like this. Mothers going through custody battles, abuse survivors trying to rebuild their lives, women who have been told they're crazy, manipulative, vindictive, simply for trying to protect themselves and their children. And they watch you, someone with a platform, someone with influence, and they see how you treat women who speak up. They see how quickly you reach for the manipulator narrative. Her voice dropped lower. That's your legacy today, Joy. Not tough journalism. Just another voice telling women that their truth doesn't matter. Joy's hands were shaking as she fumbled with her microphone. She couldn't get the clip to release. Once, twice. On the third try it came loose, and she set it on the desk with a clatter that echoed through the silent studio. A production assistant moved toward her, but Joy waved her away. In the control room, visible through the window above the audience, producers were having what appeared to be a very animated discussion. She walked off the set without another word. Her heels clicked against the floor in rapid, uneven steps. She didn't look back. The studio doors swung closed behind her with a hollow thud. The studio was completely silent for a long moment. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to follow Joy or stay focused on the guest who had just dismantled her. Jolie watched her go, then turned back to the remaining hosts and the audience with a small, tired smile. There was no triumph in her expression, just something that looked like exhaustion mixed with relief. "Well," she said quietly, "that wasn't how I expected this morning to go." She sat back down in her chair, crossing her legs with the practiced grace of someone who had been in front of cameras her entire life. Even now, after everything that had just happened, she somehow managed to look composed, elegant, the same woman who had walked red carpets for 3 decades. Whoopi found her voice first. "Angelina, I'm so sorry. That was completely inappropriate, and I want you to know that's not what this show is supposed to be about. We invited you here to talk about your work, and what just happened." "I know," Jolie nodded, holding up a hand gently. "And I appreciate you saying that. But I'm not sorry it happened. Some things need to be said. Some lines need to be defended. And if me speaking up today helps even one other person who's been through something similar feel less alone, then it was worth it." Sarah was nodding vigorously. "You said things that a lot of people needed to hear. About privacy, about children, about how we treat people going through difficult times." Jolie smiled slightly. "We're all going through something. The difference is some of us have to do it in public." She looked directly into the camera, and her voice took on a warmer tone. "To anyone watching who's going through a difficult situation with their family, I see you. Your truth matters. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself or your children." She turned back to Whoopi with that famous half-smile. "Now, I believe we were talking about Maria Callas. Shall we continue?" The clip became the most shared moment of the year within hours. But what resonated wasn't just Jolie standing up for herself. It was the glimpse behind the tabloid narrative. The mother fighting to protect her children's privacy. The woman who had stayed silent for years finally speaking her truth. The reminder that behind every celebrity headline is a human being with real pain and real stakes. Her children rallied publicly for the first time. Zahara posted simply, "My mother is my hero." Shiloh shared a childhood photo with the caption, "She's protected us our whole lives. Now we protect her." Even Maddox, usually private, wrote, "The truth will always come out eventually." Joy Behar returned to The View 3 days later. She offered no direct apology, but observers noted she seemed subdued, chastened. She never again brought up Jolie's children or her divorce in any public forum. And Angelina Jolie? She went back to her life, her children, her work, her causes. She had survived the tabloids. She had survived the divorce. She had survived Joy Behar. And she would survive whatever came next. Because that's what she did. She survived. And then she kept going. What did you think of this confrontation? Was Joy completely out of line, or was she asking legitimate questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will absolutely blow your mind.